Me? Oh, me. It's me now. All right. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. We're going to the moon. Yes. Now, some of you here may think we've never been there before, but we'll talk about that afterwards, because we're here today to look at the United States going to the moon, this time to stay, but also to get ready to go to Mars. Now, I know I probably won't see humans on Mars, but there are people in here that will. And this is the beginning. You're seeing the beginning and hearing about the beginning today from Artemis II, where we went and sent humans, I say we, NASA, went and sent people around the moon to test out the new systems. 21st century technology, not 1960s. And it went almost flawlessly. We'll gloss over a bit about the toilet. But this is a new beginning, and we are so lucky to have Kelsey Young come back to see her old professor. I'm Clive Neal, University of Notre Dame for more than 3 decades. Northern Indiana accent coming through loud and clear. So we are so lucky to have Kelsey back. Now, Kelsey graduated from the University of Notre Dame in 2009 and looks exactly the same as the day she graduated. It's really, really upsetting. But she then went to do a master's and PhD at the Arizona State University, and graduated from there in 2014. And during that time, she designed and produced a handheld instrument for astronauts, where you just basically point it and you get an analysis of a rock you're looking at. So it's a lot easier with 21st century technology than it was back in the 1960s and 70s. And then from there, she did a postdoc at Goddard Space Flight Center in the field geology group there, and got involved in astronaut training. She did that for 2 years and then went to Johnson Space Center and was a contractor down at Johnson Space Center. But then in 2018, 2018, she was hired on as a civil servant. Now, that's not an oxymoron. She is a very civil servant. And she has now been involved in the Artemis II mission, and she is here tonight to give us her experiences, what she did, and the mission, the results from the mission that is propelling us back to the moon. And without further ado, I will give you Dr. Kelsey Young.
Thanks, Clive. Thanks for the invite. Thanks for coming out. This is a surreal experience, to be sure. I graduated in 2009. I have not been back since, I think, 2016, which was the last home football game I attended. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit today about the Artemis II mission and my role in it. But before I do that, I kind of wanted to just share a little bit about my kind of personal journey from like literally sitting here in this classroom to standing here in front of this classroom. Haven't really gone too far now that I say it like that. So yeah, I came here as an undergrad in 2005. I was really interested in the physical sciences. Grew up going on hiking trips with my family, and lucked into a physical geology class, my very first class of freshman year, with this guy sitting in front of me here. And I was totally hooked, like literally one class, and it was game over for me. And it was working with Clive and another professor here at the time that really showed me that, you know, you can do geology on other planetary surfaces, and by going to places here on Earth, you can learn about other planetary bodies. So I really, you know, got my start, you know, here at Notre Dame. How many students are in the audience? Grad students, undergrads? Nice. Any bad in? No. Well, one, me. I was in Baden. Things I did kind of during my time here at Notre Dame, I was briefly on the rowing team for a couple years, and I was really into intramural sports, so like dorm sports. And then I was really into pulling very late nights in the petrology and mineralogy room, memorizing all the formulas Clive made us memorize. So then I went to Arizona State, and I was super fortunate to be involved with a few analog tests. These are mission simulations that NASA runs that really teaches us kind of how to do operations on planetary surfaces and how to develop the hardware we need to do that. And so I was super fortunate to live in that little rover up here for a week with an astronaut from NASA. I spent 2 6-week field seasons up in northern Canada at a variety of impact craters, looking at impact melt, which is ironic because now we train astronauts at that same site. So just last year we were up with a few astronauts at that exact outcrop that is baby Kelsey's doing field geology at now. And I also did do a bunch of lab work for my PhD. I did low temperature thermochronology and laser ablation. And I did do sort of research, with faculty in the department here that was kind of doing some down and in lab work. So when I kind of started that element of my PhD, it really brought back the time that I'd spent here in Dr. Peter Burns's lab. Then I went to NASA. So as Clive said, I've kind of been collecting my NASA Center bingo cards, I guess. I went to Goddard, JSC back to Goddard. I am one of the lead astronaut trainers, both in the classroom and in the field. So we train, the new astronaut classes, and we just had a new class come in this year, so I'll actually be heading out in 3 weeks to train them at the same site as you can see up here. And continued my work with the handheld X-ray fluorescence spectrometer, this time in lava tubes, which was really great. I submitted research proposals to NASA, to the Science Mission Directorate, and led field teams, led multi-year research projects that really helped develop field skills, but also leadership skills. And then I supported analog missions like NEMO. I was a support diver, a working diver for NEMO, which really taught me about operations as well as working as an operator in an underwater environment, which is of course analogous to spaceflight. And then really got into operations. So I really nestled in and made my home in human spaceflight operations. And by that I mean, how are the ground teams, for science integrated into the overall flight operations environment? Are the crew properly trained? Do we have our science objectives woven into the fabric of the mission properly? Are our facilities that are our science backrooms that our scientists support from, do they meet the needs of actively performing science? Really, I set out to make sure that science was really interwoven into the fabric of flight operations. And that ultimately culminated in one hat I wear, which is the Artemis Science Flight Operations Lead, where, again, I'm ultimately responsible out of the Science Mission Directorate to make sure that science is where it's supposed to be in operations. I did wear a second hat for this mission. Really fortunate to say that I am the Lunar Science Lead for Artemis II. So I got to make sure that our science this is me in the Orion mock-up down at the Johnson Space Center, got to work with our amazing lunar science team to develop the science objectives and make sure that the mission profile had those objectives in a way that we could really maximize science return from the mission. And then I was the first science officer to sit on console and mission control, which is a brand new flight controller position for Artemis. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. And we just finished a very successful mission, and I have to set the record straight. The toilet was fine. It was the vent line. The Orion engineers are very touchy about that. It's like if your toilet in your house worked, but the plumbing didn't work. Fortunately, the moon worked great. So we were able to get a really amazing amount of lunar science out of this mission, and I'm here to talk about that tonight. I really wanted to keep as few words on these slides as possible and really wanted to just tell you the story of the mission using the amazing pictures that we kind of took along the way, both of the ground teams and, of course, from the crew themselves. And my goal is to really leave time for discussion and questions, so please do think of questions that I can expound on, because I want to walk you through my experience, but I also really want to hear from you guys. Okay, so before we dive into Artemis II, I want to talk a little bit about, sort of the giants whose shoulders we stood on, for Artemis II and building into the future. Of course, the Apollo missions were absolutely, generational in what they provided to lunar and planetary science. Operationally speaking, we obviously learned a lot from them, and I can say, having spent time with some of the lunar samples myself, like the lunar samples that were collected by the Apollo astronauts are still actively being used to really answer some high priority science questions, including in the lab of Dr. Clive Neal here. Also, I wanted to put in the photo up at the top left because that is Dr. Farouk Elbaz, who really led the development of orbital observations in Apollo. Very stressful following his first act because he was really just absolutely pivotal in developing that branch of Apollo science. We did have a chance to meet with him. He came and talked to our lunar science team, and it was, just a really, really inspirational hour we spent with him. But then, of course, ever since Apollo, we have sent a variety of orbiting missions as well as landed missions to the lunar surface, which has really, in many ways, enabled what we do with Artemis. And so certainly the observations that I'm going to talk to you about today, they are a complementary data set to these really incredible missions that were designed for science, like the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, for example, showing just some amazing high-resolution near-side and far-side mosaics here, as well as on the bottom, topography of the lunar surface taken with the laser altimeter instruments on LRO. And so, the science that we really sought to develop for the Artemis II mission was really to complement those observations and take advantage of what was unique about our mission, which is humans, in situ around the moon. And so that was really the spirit we took into defining our science objectives and the spirit I took into implementing them in the mission timeline. So this is the Artemis II mission profile. We launched from the Kennedy Space Center on April 1st, 10 minutes into the first available launch date, incredible. And so we did do some vehicle checkouts. Of course, the main objective of this mission was a test flight. It was the first time astronauts flew the Orion vehicle. And so, first and foremost, we wanted to understand the vehicle and return our crew safely home. So they did some vehicle checkouts near Earth. They did some proximity operations demos, which will be really important for future Artemis missions. And then we ultimately, the day after launch, go for the translunar injection burn, which sent us on a multi-day trip to the moon. I'll talk a little bit about what we were doing during that multi-day trip, but ultimately it culminated in a several-hour lunar flyby. I hope you guys tuned in. If not, you should go back and watch it. It's so awesome. And then after, we had a few-day trip home before splashing down in the Pacific Ocean. So I'm going to spend kind of the rest of the time talking about the lunar science piece, but there were a number of really exciting other objectives of the mission, including, flying Orion for the first time. So what did lunar science look like on Artemis II? We had 3 data sets that were crew-driven and 1 that was vehicle-driven. The crew were responsible for taking pictures. They had 3 Nikon cameras, 2 Nikon D5s and 1 Z9 with 3 different zoom lenses. And we really, I'll explain kind of the targeting process of how we asked them to image and describe certain features, but it was ultimately those 3 cameras with those 3 lenses that formed the thousands and thousands of images that we have gotten down during the mission, many of which you saw released online. The data set that we were most excited for was the second one, which is the crew verbal descriptions. This is where they really use those human brains and describe what they see. I'll talk about how we developed the objectives that were manifested in the descriptions, but we got some really great stuff. We also allowed for the possibility of them to annotate what they were seeing. If anybody's done field work before, you know that your field notebook is your #1 most important tool, and you really want to make sure you're sketching photos of what you see in the field to really capture the nuance, because I guarantee you when you go back to the lab, you're like, I'm going to remember. That's going to be fine. I'm going to remember. You don't remember. So we gave them the ability to annotate screenshots of the moon as they were seeing it to really capture that nuance. That was something that a few Apollo astronauts did to great effect, including something that led ultimately to a science investigation on our mission about dust lofting. Gene Cernan made a great little scribble on the side of a procedure that ultimately led to a science mission and some of our objectives as well. And then the vehicle cameras, there were GoPro cameras mounted on each of the solar array wing tips. So kind of right here at the end of each of these solar array wings. And we got some really wonderful high resolution data from that, and it was also what brought us the live stream, a lot of the live stream from In the Mission that you saw where we're streaming that video. This is Orion. We had, of course, the crew module where you saw our astronauts doing their exploration. We had the European Space Agency provided service module. And I wanted to include that here also to show where the solar array wings fit on the vehicle and what great data we were able to get from the GoPros at the end of them. I also wanted to highlight, I'm the lunar science lead for the mission, and we will spend the rest of the time talking about the moon, but I did want to highlight some other really amazing science investigations on the mission. The Biological and Physical Sciences Division at NASA provided this AVATAR payload, which were actual tissue samples taken from the 4 astronauts themselves that flew to evaluate, effects of radiation and space travel on humans. And we also, speaking of human research, they had a number of objectives in human research, including wearing these actigraphy watches, which really kind of recorded their bodily response to the journey of the mission. So there was a lot of really, really exciting research outside of lunar science that focused really on the human body. That being said, the rest of the talk, moon. Speaking of which, you're about to see a lot of pictures of the moon. It's so great. And so this is actually a visual showing the unique vantage point that the Artemis II mission had. And I mentioned 2 things earlier. I mentioned, of course, the Apollo missions, and I mentioned the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. Those took a very, very different path around the moon than Artemis II did. And so I wanted to show you a visual that kind of shows what the unique view that Artemis II had compared to these other really, really critical and science-defining missions. So it'll show you the path and the orbit that the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter takes and the altitude at which it flies above the surface of the moon. We're looking at a roughly 50-kilometer altitude that is in a very specific polar orbit designed to address the science objectives of that mission. Apollo missions flew in a circular orbit at roughly 110 kilometers off the surface. And then Artemis II is all the way out here at 8,000 kilometers. You might say, that's really far. What science can you do at that distance? I hope to prove that to you here. Essentially, it really offers a really unique vantage point. It's a whole disk lunar view, which is not something we had the ability to do from cislunar space in Apollo. Some of our science questions were specifically designed around this unique view and this whole lunar disk view. And also, we were able to access parts of the far side with human eyes that were never before seen, and I'll explain that in a second. So this is a graphic that our visualization lead, Ernie Wright at Goddard, made, and the lighter portions show the portions of the moon that were viewable, in cislunar space by Apollo astronauts. All the darker portions were not viewable during any Apollo mission that was near the moon. This is because Apollo missions targeted launching into opportunities where the full near side was illuminated. That's because, of course, the landings for Apollo were all on the near side, and so they really wanted to prioritize getting crew eyes on the locations where the astronauts would actually be doing their spacewalks on the surface. Additionally, they flew a lot closer to the moon, and so the horizon view of the spacecraft did not enable viewing of the poles. So what you see here is big polar regions never before seen, and then this large section of the far side has never before been seen by human eyes, including a feature that really spoke to the crew in the Oriental Basin, and I'll explain kind of the excitement around that feature a little bit later. But when the crew saw this visual, it was like light bulb went off of okay, I understand, we're able to contribute something unique here. And the trick is we didn't know which moon they would get, right? And by that I mean at any given time, 50% of the moon is illuminated and 50% of the moon is not. And the exact time that they launch and the exact time where they go for that translunar injection burn dictates the exact time they will get to the moon, and therefore which 180 degrees of the moon would be literally illuminated by the sun when they got there. So it necessitated our team to develop a list of targets or like features on the lunar surface we wanted the crew to observe for 360 degrees of the moon, so that we would be ready for whatever kind of moon that was given to us with when we actually launched. But regardless, we knew that, regardless of which moon we got, they were going to be able to see some parts of the moon that had not been seen before, and that was exciting to them. So we did develop, I promised you very few words. This is the most wordy slide. The rest are going to be a lot of pictures. So we developed a science traceability matrix with 10 lunar science objectives and 4 what we called exploration capability objectives. So the top 10 there are our lunar science themes, where we really used those to develop the list of targets that the crew were given to image at the moon. We binned them by priority. You can see there's 3 priority buckets there, and we did that based around what the unique mission profile given to us with Artemis II was able to accomplish, how far they were from the moon, how fast they were moving, how many hours they had in cislunar space to make the observations. And you can see also that across the bottom we took very seriously the charge of Artemis II is but the first crewed mission in the series of Apollo missions that are planned. We want to set future missions up for success. We want to make sure that future science teams, when we have longer missions, when we have spacewalks on the surface, they have the infrastructure, the operational processes in place to be successful. So we really wanted to get our op structure as mature as possible so that those future missions, we can be totally confident that they have what they need. Here is kind of a simplified schematic of where our objectives popped up in the mission profile, similar to we call them swoosh charts that showed the overall mission as a whole. So we did get some really amazing images of Earth when they were still close to the Earth. 3 of the 4 crew members actually had multiple months on the International Space Station taking pictures of Earth, so they were really excited to see it from this new vantage point. They had some small tasks for us along the way. I didn't include them all here. The biggest one, though, was on flight day 4. They got to review their targets, review what they'd be doing when they got to the moon. And that means that the first 3 days of the mission, the lunar science team was like frantically being like, okay, this is the moon we're getting. Like, what targets do we want? How much time do we have? What order do we want them to see the targets in? And then uplinked that file to them, which they reviewed on flight day 4. We also then, when we got close to the moon, we had a crew conference where the science officer, who was me at the time, was talking directly to the crew right before they did their flyby. We had a multi-hour flyby, and then the next morning we had another crew conference with them where we did not view that as a debrief. That's not like, hey, what worked, what didn't? That's active science data collection for us, right? They're our field scientists. They're the members of the science team that are in the field doing the exploration, and we wanted to capture all those nuances before they do what they just did, which is go through a pretty intense few days, re-entry, and then doing all the amazing things that you guys have been seeing in the media. So we wanted to use that 30 minutes to really capture those nuances. So we're going to talk about each one of these phases through a series of awesome pictures. Before we do that, though, I want to kind of show you a little slice of one of the classroom training modules that we delivered to the crew. It was essentially showing that, when you observe these things, here is what we, the science team, hear when you give those descriptions, and here's why that matters scientifically. So, for example, color and albedo, this was like our #1 priority objective. We want you to describe these nuanced color details that the human eye is so good at pulling out. That tells us about composition, and ultimately composition tells us about what processes were active at the lunar surface and how recently. We want you to describe a series of geologic features. That tells us about geologic history and ultimately helps us constrain what process has been active and when. And then we heard some really great, if you listen to any of the flyby, you heard especially pilot Victor Glover just like going on and on, waxing poetic about the Terminator. I'll show some pictures of that later. My goodness, he was very inspired by that. That helps us get at these like really subtle morphologic differences, which also help us constrain these really high priority questions. A thing we like to also remind both the crew and the public is that what the moon has experienced, our planet has experienced. But we have plate tectonics, oceans, trees, all that stuff that's really great and super important and we love it, but is also obscuring the geologic record of our own planet. It's waiting for us at the moon. It's exposed for us at the moon. So by studying the moon, we actually learned something about how our own planet evolved over time. So I want to show you a little animation that really gets at the impact of illumination on what science questions we can ask the crew to help us answer. And so the way that we kind of taught the crew this is we ran an activity in the classroom where we got a big Tupperware bin and we filled it with sand and gravel. And if anybody's ever been to the beach, you know that sand is not perfectly, happily homogeneous and uniform. There's texture, there's ridges, there's different particle sizes. So imagine taking that box of a little mini beach and going into a room and turning off all the lights, fully dark. You then shine a flashlight on that box of sand, and when you shine that flashlight straight down, what you see is color. You see shades of gray, you see nuanced color detail. And then when you move that light to basically shine obliquely on the surface, you cannot see any color. It's completely washed out. What you see instead is morphology and texture. Both of those things hold science value, but what the crew is able to see really is driven by the illumination conditions present during the flyby. So what's interesting for the crew is that while we can't control the sun, right, they are moving. So their relationship to the surface, when you consider the angle of the sun, is changing throughout the flyby. And we wanted to take advantage of that when we planned out our targets. So to show you, here's an image of the lunar surface. Any features jump out to anybody in here? Not you, Clive. What do you see? Here? Yeah. Yes, I'm glad you picked that one out first. That will become relevant. Anyone else?
Is that a fusion on that line?
This guy?
Yes.
Any guesses on what that is? Yeah.
Is it,
Exactly right. Yep, it's evidence of, in this case, a moonquake. It is a fault on the lunar surface. What else jumps out to you guys? What do you see when you kind of look at this image? What pops out? Oh, sorry. Hi. Yes. Yes. As an impact crater scientist, really appreciate that observation. Yes, absolutely. There are a bunch of different circles, right? And they all look a little bit different. Some are big, some are small, some are lumpy, some are smooth. You also notice a bit of color nuance, right? Like this isn't all homogeneous. This isn't all white or black or gray. It's a mix of all of them. So what happens when we move the sun, again, to shine obliquely on the surface instead of overhead? Yeah, so all those things that you just noticed, this beautiful fault, all of the texture and morphology difference that we just talked about with the craters, all of that gets washed away. And what do you see instead? Yeah. Yes, and what other colors? White, gray, and lots of stuff in between, right? It almost looks like a bit like white and gray tie-dye a little bit. That's the power of taking advantage of the crew looking at the same features in different illumination conditions and really getting at both color and albedo and therefore geologic processes as well as morphology, which tells us something about how recently these processes were active. So to just flip between them for a second. So let's imagine, this area here is a target for the crew during Artemis II. What if we have them look at it at the beginning of the flyby and then later in the flyby when that angle of the sun relative to the moon relative to the Orion spacecraft has changed. You're able to really tease out those subtle nuances and really helps us get at formation, processes, composition, which ultimately help us constrain the evolution of the moon over time and even the evolution of our own planet over time. But this requires quite an intricate choreography, as you might imagine. We have several hours of a flyby. We have a lot of targets from a lot of different science themes. It's like a Royal Rumble to get down on what targets we want. We practiced it a lot of times. The Lunar Science team simmed it over and over and over and over again because we knew that we had very limited time to make those decisions. And so this is what we had to take into account, right? They are moving at this rate of speed. Some parts of the moon will disappear that they can see at the beginning, and by the end of the flyby, they won't be able to see them anymore. How do you make sure you structure the targets in the right order so that you get them when they're visible? If you want to view this fault scarp more than one time, you need to give it to them at the right points in the timeline, spread enough hours apart to enable this kind of analysis. And crew are human beings. You can't just have them just run 100 miles an hour for 6, 7 hours at a time. So how do you structure breaks? You want to have some people taking images and some people giving descriptions, and you want them to switch because you want to take advantage of having 4 amazing brains on a problem at the same time. So what we did is develop this piece of software. This was developed by a group down at the Johnson Space Center that came from ISS crew Earth observations and ultimately formed a crew lunar observations team and built this software from scratch with input from our lunar science team and from the crew. The crew saw this over and over and over again and were like, I'm not so sure. And they were able to really fine tune it to make it what the crew needs. So this file is built into 2 halves. One half is the lunar geography review, exactly what it sounds like. It's just help for the crew to remember what they're seeing. There was a study aid for them. I know for a fact they were referencing it on their way to the moon to say, okay, let's remember where this feature is relative to this feature. It also had the ability to you could change the illumination conditions so that it would match what they would see when they actually got there. And then the other half was this lunar targeting plan. This was absolutely a critical part of our operations. It had basically the row of targets in the right order that we wanted them to image. The gray bar is the amount of time that it was visible to them. You can see it during this time. Once the gray bar ends, not visible, but the white was where the order in which we wanted them to make those observations. And then on each page, when you click into each target, it's the why. Here's why we care about it. Here's how you find it. Here's what we want you to take pictures of. We want you to use this zoom lens because we really want you to get in there and look at these fine scale features, or don't use the camera. We actually want the naked eye view because we really want to understand the context in the whole lunar disk. And so this was what they had up in front of them throughout the entire flyby. It's what they studied beforehand. I was literally getting texts from the crew the day before launch being like, send me another picture of this. I saw it in the LTP. I want to make sure we nail it. They really leaned in and making sure that they understood what we were asking them to do. So you might be thinking, this is a lot. This is a heavy choreographed thing with basically 360 degrees of a moon of 200 targets that they needed to memorize, each with their own special objectives, in an order that is only based on when they actually launch, so we can't prep them for it. But the order's really important, so please make sure you nail it. Obviously predicated on a very well-trained crew. And if you watched even a single second of the mission, I think you will agree, swoon. These 4 people, so amazing. I am so privileged. We started training them literally 2 weeks after they were selected. So we had 3 years training them, and they were in. They are so in. They are so invested in the moon, in having it be such a critical part of their story for this mission, and in doing what we asked of them, which is, you are not the crew executing our plan. You are members of the science team. You are our field explorers. You need to really understand what we're asking and what the objectives are, not just, I need to memorize what Oriental looks like, but why do we care about Oriental? Here, let's get into the science objectives. So that required a lot of time and relationship building and frankly trust building with them as well that I think you saw play out in the flyby, right? The discussions I was able to have with them were quite elevated, and it was clear that we had just built that shared language through the experience we had training them. So what that looked like is classroom training, field training, and mission simulations. So we got them, this was actually the first real meaty classroom training session we had with them. We taught them kind of lunar fundamentals, but this was the first mission specific, here's what you're doing classroom session we did with them, geared around lunar geography. So you see them actually holding the lunar geography review and a moon globe, of course. And actually just really teaching them about our science objectives and where the features are on the moon that we really were excited about. We took them to the field. We took all 4 prime crew and the 2 backup crew to the Icelandic Highlands 2 years ago. This was a place that many of the Apollo astronauts went. We actually were in the same campsite that the Apollo astronauts were in at the time. And we were able to help them build their toolkit, right? So they're not walking on the surface. They are looking at the surface from above. We want to teach them what those landscapes look like so that they can give accurate descriptions. We want to have them give descriptions in the field so that we can say, hey, you and I are looking at the same outcrop. Describe it. Really? Did you capture this nuance? When you actually said this, a more effective way of describing that would have been this. And in that way, we could really develop this common language across our team, because that's really what they were, a part of our team. And we just wanted to build confidence in them that they could do what we're asking them to do. And it's really on this trip where we're sharing camp together for a week and driving across all of Iceland in the same field vehicles that really we were able to come together as an integrated team. We also had some more hands-on classroom training sessions. This is in one of our science back rooms, actually, and we had them sit at tables with the flight-relevant hardware, with the same cameras, lenses, crew tablets, targeting plan, at the right distance away from the screen of a visualization of the moon so they could practice what we were actually asking them to do. And so they were taking pictures of the screens, they were practicing descriptions, they were recording those descriptions, and we were giving feedback on those descriptions. It was these multiple touch points that really enabled them to develop the skills that they knew they needed to do to execute the plan. Then we hung a giant inflatable moon globe on a giant crane in the high bay of the Space Vehicle Mock-Up Facility at the Johnson Space Center. We were trying to think of a way. We were well, this is great. They're sitting in the classroom, they're getting the mental reps, but they're going to be in a really small space. They're going to have to rotate through. Or the choreography of the hardware involved. I mean, they had 4 crew tablets, the headsets that we needed them to give the descriptions on that had these feet long cords. They had 3 lenses, 3 cameras, and they were in a really small space. So we wanted to get them the experience of imaging and describing in a representative environment. And so we were sitting and we were well, it's got to be in the mock-up. I think we could maybe rig a TV. I think that would be really great. And then one of our team members was we have a giant moon. It's basically a balloon. It's really light. I think we could maybe, and so, and nobody, we were this is ridiculous. And then everyone we continued to elevate the idea to was we did it. Honestly, some of my favorite ridiculous, the number of safety reviews we do at NASA, so many, you guys, so many. This one was great. You're well, what are the risks here? Well, if someone opens the door, a breeze could blow the moon around, I guess. Anyway, we executed trainings in here, and we actually did 2 with the crew. This one, and then we did one late at night, way after hours, and we turned off all the lights in the building and illuminated the moon from within. And it really allowed them to get in the physical space and practice what they needed to do. This pair is going to be at the windows. You're going to have the camera. You're not. When do you switch? How do you switch? How do you manage all the flashcards that you have to manage? It allowed them just the opportunity to, in that high-fidelity environment, really practice what was, in essence, a really heavily scripted, not a lot of room for error, several hours. So before I go into the actual mission execution, I want to just talk for a couple slides about the structure of our team on the ground. So our team, this is only a subset of them. It's very hard to get all of us in the same room at the same time. But this is a subset of the lunar science team, which was made up of about 60 people. It was really, lunar scientists, geologists, visualization specialists, GIS specialists, communicators, photographers, people who generate visuals. It was really a diverse team pulled from across NASA. If you follow NASA at all, especially Artemis Science, you might know that future missions will have competed teams from the community. We did not have the runway for this mission to have time to externally solicit science team members. So, as lunar science lead, I was responsible for looking across NASA and pulling the different, expertise that we needed from across the agency to support this mission, so that when we have our competed teams online for the surface missions, we can really feel good about the structure that we've put in place for them. So what that structure looks like is, you guys, so many acronyms. So many acronyms. I'm sure I've already screwed up, but please do keep me honest if I say an acronym and don't explain it. So this is kind of like our kind of three-headed science operations structure. In the front room of mission control, the FICR, flight control room, we have our new science officer console position. We also have a brand new back room that we developed from the ground up in the Mission Control Center called the CEEES, Science Evaluation Room. I designed this room specifically for science. It is not like any other traditional flight control room where you have rows of consoles with people on headsets. This was designed, for science to allow that dialogue. If any of you know scientists, we like to chat, to build off of each other, to say, oh, I just heard this amazing idea, I'm going to capitalize it on this. And so we really wanted to allow for that open dialogue and science discussion. Then we had a room, s'more, yum, across campus, like a 5-minute walk from Mission Control, that was developed by our partners down at the Johnson Space Center, the Astromaterials Group. It's going to be used for other purposes moving forward, but for Artemis missions, it forms an additional back room. We also developed this patch, which represents, the science operations community. There's a lot of meaning built into that patch. One of our science officers designed it himself, and it really represents the level to which science is integrated into flight operations. So just a little bit about each one of these elements. Science officer is a front room flight control position, responsible as the senior flight controller for lunar science and geology. Therefore, I really advocated hard to have it be populated by lunar scientists and geologists who have been trained in operations. So rather than saying, hey, flight controller who has grown up flight controlling and is really good at it, here's a PhD in lunar science, we specifically selected people who had that operational mindset. Again, if you know scientists, not everybody. But people who are really good at packaging communications, thinking really quickly, being flexible in an environment that was not developed for us. So we selected 3 of us to support the Artemis II mission. We'll continue to bring on more science officers in the future. But we ultimately, just like any other front room discipline, are a flight director certified position. So we go through the classroom training and then a whole bunch of different sims to ultimately get certified. The sims look like just having really bad days, like lots of malfunctions stacked on top of each other. I'm trying to think of some examples. Like at one point, there was the spacecraft, because it's not just you that's simming, right? It's all the people around you. So like all the disciplines need things to go wrong. Like everybody has to have a really bad day. So when you get to like toward the end, they've like kind of run out of like like this little thing could go wrong, and they're like, okay, like we're gonna just throw everything we have. So like examples of the spacecraft spinning wildly out of control while still trying to observe the moon, and then, oh no, fire. It's like, whoa. That was a particularly bad one. So it's ultimately, right, so that when you get to the actual mission, you don't have a bad day because you've had all the bad days already. You should get to the mission and feel that it was easy because you've had really, really bad days. So we had some bad days, and we learned as a team. We got better as individuals, and ultimately, what you saw was a very prepared flight control team in all aspects of the mission. Artemis II, really, really proud of this. It was the first mission where we did have this science officer, a science flight controller in the front room in a human spaceflight mission. So in Apollo, we of course had these amazing science backrooms of geologists that were elsewhere in the building reporting up through, by the end of Apollo missions, it was through an astronaut, to report up to the crew. In International Space Station, they do a wonderful mix of payload science on the International Space Station. It's run through a whole different ops center that has to go through multiple layers to get that input up to the crew. For Artemis II, not only do we have someone in the front room, but ultimately the flight control team recognized that you guys are good operators. You can talk directly to the crew during those really critical phases of flight. So if you tuned into the flyby, you probably got very sick of hearing my voice. I was super fortunate to be able to talk directly to them, which means more science, right? If I can ask that quick question coming out of an observation, we maximize the science. If I have to go through like multiple people to ultimately get Capcom to ask the follow-up, we'll get some of them through, but probably not as much as we were able to get with this mission. We also had these two rooms, the SIR and the SMORE. The focus of these rooms really, developed throughout the scope of the mission, right? Because at first we're like, oh gosh, we need a lunar targeting plan, go, go, go. Here's the final trajectory file. Here's what targets we want. Build the software package, get it uplinked. Then we had the lunar flyby like prep and support. So like the file review activities they had, essentially doing the homework, and the crew conferences. Then we had the flyby execution itself, and we had that crew conference the next morning where we really wanted them to turn and burn on the data and get some early analysis looks to like maximize the science we were able to get. So these rooms, as I said, were designed specifically for lunar science operations. I was the sort of subject matter expert lead on designing the SIR with the amazingly experienced team from the Johnson Space Center that has built out all of the flight control rooms there. But we did sneak a couple Easter eggs in, and so I will enlighten you. So the blue stripe on the wall, we chose to be as close to Earth blue as possible. And then all of the new flight control rooms in JSC have these like hexagonal tiles of different colors. I was like, what if I gave you a pattern of putting the hexagons in a specific shape? And they were like, okay, like, sure. So this is actually a 2D representation of the 3D crystal structure of the mineral anorthite, which is the dominant moon-forming mineral. All the white stuff, when you look up at the moon at night, is basically this. And here it is on the floor of the SIR. So when you go in the SIR, you walk on the moon and look back at Earth. So very proud of that. And so taken in aggregate, this is our science operations structure for lunar science and geology and Artemis missions. We learned a lot. I mean, some things went well, some things didn't go well, which was the entire point, right? Like not everything was going to go perfectly the first time out of the gate, which is why we really had those objectives designed to flex the system, to stress the system. But I've taken way too long to get to the actual exciting mission execution part, except that was 10 days and the rest of it was like my entire career. So you're lucky. It was only 30 minutes. That could have been worse. So mission execution, I'm just going to show a bunch of pictures, honestly, and just like talk to you about my experience and what our team was doing. But I'm super happy to dive into any of the like technical details if you guys want in the Q&A, which I swear we're going to have time for. I'm a very fast talker. So launch was on April 1st. Again, it felt like a lot of stops and starts to get to the launch pad. In particular, like we really thought we might have gone a month or two earlier. And then when it came down to it, when it was like, this is the window, 10 minutes into the first day. It was amazing. I was there, and I swear the whole day, like nobody thought it was going. And the crew thought it too. Like they've said it in their interviews. They're like, this is the first day. And so then all of a sudden, like you're getting down to the count, and we're all like, okay, like we're at the 10-minute hold, the pre-planned 10-minute hold. Oh my gosh, we got through the hold. Like the countdown's going down, and all of a sudden, like it's this energy that just like, totally shifted. It was amazing to be there for. I sobbed. I got to know these 4 humans really, really well. Seeing people you care a lot about jumping on a rocket that has never been flown before by people, it is an intense experience. I was so happy for them. Like I watched it with another friend of mine who knows them even better than I do, and we just full on sobbed. Fortunately, I was not on console or doing any actual mission function. Did manage to keep it together the rest of the mission. So just flyby, I was a tourist, and so I sobbed. I did not include those pictures. Oh my gosh. So the night of launch, they did take some Earth photos. They were pretty close, right, because they were doing the proximity operations. The next day, though, when we did go for the translunar injection burn and we started to get a little bit farther away, they started to get these like really unique perspectives. The pictures of just the Earth and the moon are amazing, but like the ones through the window like this are just so powerful. They tell such an amazing story to me. And it's, I don't know. this evokes what the mission was doing. This was as far away from the Earth as we had been in so many years, and it was just the beginning of the journey away from Earth. And then they sent back this. Yeah, this picture came down, and it was then that like the people around me, not that they weren't convinced before, were like, oh, like, yes, I see. Even just in this one image, you can see so much science in here. Like our earth science colleagues were like just absolutely swooning about it. I mean, check it out. We've got, yes, we've got aurora at the North Pole and the South Pole. You have like kind of the thin atmospheric band that blends underneath the aurora in this case. You see zodiacal light here, which is interplanetary dust particles coming out from the Earth. When we were training the crew on the difference between zodiacal light and solar corona, which will become relevant later. What?
The large brown space on the left.
Oh, I think it's, yeah, I think it's Australia. Yeah, okay, you might be right, yeah. Yes, here. The commander, Reed Wiseman, was like, oh, zodiacal light, I used to see that all the time in International Space Station. He got really excited about it. He actually took this picture. And so it was just with one picture where we started to say, wow, like we're about to get something really powerful. Then we got eyes on the moon, and I was in the FICR when I heard, folks say, oh my gosh, like, I think we see the moon on the vehicle cameras, and I did have my like very funnily professional comment on the flight loop where I was like, science copies can confirm moon. So I got a PhD in geology, friends. And so from there on, it was only getting bigger and bigger, and you could hear it in the crew's voices. I mean, like every day they like got eyes on it, because it wasn't all the time that the vehicle geometry would support them seeing it. You could just hear it. Like they were just like starting to feel it, starting to get excited, and obviously I was very chill in the FICR. This is an all business room, but inside it was like absolutely freaking out as well.
On that previous photo, below right, is that a moon or planet?
It's a planet. I believe it's Saturn, but I'll have to double check. So seeing the same view that we just saw a couple slides ago of Earth out the window, but it's the moon out the window, and we're getting closer and closer. Again, you could just feel like the excitement and the passion start to ratchet up with the crew. Frankly, this is one of my like all-time favorite photos from the mission. I think it tells the story of the mission in one photo, in my opinion. And we started to say, oh wow, we can actually see targets that we have on the targeting plan close enough where they can actually see them. Oriental was a feature that we were really excited about. The crew was really excited about it. And I think it was around the time that this picture was taken where you heard Reed was like really into Oriental. He was like, we're going to get this. And he comes on and he's like, you guys, we got it, I can see it. And human eyes had not seen Oriental before. So it was, if you're looking for a little endorphin boost, you should go listen to that part of the flight loop. So then we got to the flyby. And what that looked like is the crew operating in pairs. And so Reed and Jeremy were a pair, and Victor and Christina were a pair. And they took turns. One pair would be the window pair, and one pair would be the cabin pair. The window pair was the ones at the forward windows with the crew tablets and with the Nikon cameras, taking turns with the zoom lens and taking turns just with the unaided eye. They would swap themselves within their turn at the windows. So, Reed got a turn with the cameras, and 20, 30 minutes later, Jeremy got the turn with the cameras. The other pair, the cabin pair, was also doing a lot of really, really critical stuff. They were responsible for the vehicle, of course, like monitoring, the health of the vehicle and talking to mission control about any issues that might have come up during the flyby. They were helping the window pair. So, oh, can you not find Ohm Crater? Here, let me help try to guide you into it. And then they were giving the science sit reps, which if you did tune into the flyby, this is what you heard. These were the updates that came, a few updates an hour, where they were giving descriptions and saying, Reed's in window 2, Jeremy's in window 3, there was an issue with the camera, but we fixed it, like that kind of just status, as well as descriptions of the moon. And you probably heard each of the 4 people have their own unique personalities, and that came out in the descriptions. It was very funny to listen to them do that. Very expected, because again, we had really built those relationships with them. But I mean, they started to see the moon, and it was just like pure joy, pure wonder in their voices. We did slow roll the start of the target so they could have some like, we're doing it, this is it, that's the real moon, not the visuals that the science team provides us. Yeah, the recordings, which will be made public, capture that childlike joy in the best possible way. So again, Reed and Jeremy were up first. Love this picture, especially since it has our beautiful geography review on there. Yes. So looking out the window, describing what he's seeing. He was the person at the time that didn't have the camera right, so he's making the unaided eye observations. And we started to get great pictures down, oh my gosh. So Oriental, we did it, is this beautiful impact basin here. You also see kind of the near side, far side boundary, which is sort of right here. So all this we can see from Earth, of course, when that part of the moon is illuminated. You can see Aristarchus Plateau, which really catches the eye when you look up at the moon, even with your unaided eye. It's this bright white spot that the crew, you know, we'd actually give them homeworks before they launched of like going out and just in their backyard and observing what they see, and Aristarchus like really pops out. Also in this picture are the 2 craters for which the crew came up with their proposed names, which are being submitted to the IAU to try to formalize that process. Integrity Crater named for the vehicle, and Carroll Crater named for the Commander Reed Wiseman's wife who passed away several years ago. Very emotional moment for everybody. It was the only time I saw like widespread tears, you know, in mission control. It really meant a lot to be a citizen of planet Earth observing that moment. And both are in this picture. Integrity Crater is like right in here, and Carroll Crater is right in here. So Aristarchus, here it is. It's so beautiful. Even in this picture, of course, all these pictures are taken from the mission. I have gotten the question a few times, are they photoshopped? No, they are not photoshopped. We will be releasing like all 8,000-9,000 images to the public. As you might imagine, it takes a while to process that many images. And by process, I do not mean Photoshop. I mean literally assign them image numbers and physically go through the process of uploading them in a portal where you guys can all access them. Aristarchus was a good one because, again, this was a target that draws the eye. It's also a target that the lunar science community cares a lot about. There's a lot of missions in formulation right now, purely science missions, to go and evaluate Aristarchus. We got crew observations of it, and the first thing Jeremy said, I see green, and I don't see this color anywhere else, and I see it. I need your little annotation. It's awesome. Can't wait for you guys to see the sketches. Of the green color, like right up in here. He said, I see brown everywhere. I see green only in this unique spot. Green tells us something about the type of process, the type of volcanic activity that formed those materials, and the fact that we can still see the green color and it has not been weathered away tells us how recently those processes may have been taking place. So already we were like off and running. I had a video screen next to me of the science evaluation room at my console, and I've worked with these people for a very long time, some of them like since the beginning of my career, and I can recognize body language, including like backs of heads, and I could just tell like it was like the excitement was ramping up in the stir. It was a delight to behold. So we had Reed and Jeremy as our first pair, again looking at the lunar targeting plan, and if I'm not mistaken, the designer of that user interface just walked in. Hi, Dave. So if you have questions about that, he's your guy. And then they took photos as well. So this weird blue bubbly thing is a shroud that basically is designed to like cover the window with a space for the lens to block out all the ambient light in the cabin. There wasn't much ambient light, but there was some, and that really affects the quality of the images. So especially the person with the zoom lens, we had them use that blue shroud. Oriental. Swoon! Oriental is a really compelling feature to the lunar science community because it is an impact basin. Impact basins are very, very, very common features across the solar system. Impact craters are, the most ubiquitous geologic feature across solid-state bodies in the solar system. Any planetary body with a solid surface is covered in impact craters. Impact basins are really big impact craters that typically have these like multiple rings that form in these extra large events. And Oriental is special because it is the type impact basin that we study to understand impact basins across the solar system. It's kind of just like the classic, the OG impact basin. And we had never seen it with human eyes before because it was never illuminated when Apollo missions flew. And so, again, the crew just like really got excited about that potential because of how excited we were about Oriental. And so, of course, we started to pull down images and get really excited about their descriptions. Bless you. Then we had Victor and Christina swap in. This is actually one image with both of them. You can kind of see just like the environment of the cabin. They're wedged into these really like interesting positions to try to get the right views out of the window while also managing the hardware and looking at the lunar targeting plan. And so they got on the horn and we started getting sit reps from the other two, Reed and Jeremy, who are now kind of freed up to do those science sit reps. And we're just, at this point, moving through the targeting plan. It's at this point in the flyby that the Earth started to make itself known a little bit, right? The Earth starts getting closer and closer to the moon, and it ultimately sets behind the moon, and that kicked off our planned, very expected, roughly 45-minute loss of signal, where literally Orion could not see the Earth, and therefore the communication antennas could not connect to the ground station, and so they had 45 minutes of peace without listening to me yammering at them. More descriptions, please. And so this was when we started to see the Earth coming closer and closer to the moon. If you're anything like me, you've looked at the very iconic Apollo 8 Earthrise image many, many times where you have the beautiful Earth popping out behind the moon. And you listen to the audio of that moment from the Apollo 8 crew, and it's like it caught them, it totally caught them by surprise. They scrambled to get the camera, and the image is just totally spectacular. We were really looking forward to that moment with this crew of catching, the analogous moment where they can look back at all of us sitting here today. They look back at their families and their friends and everybody who got them there and all of us who worked on the mission and all of you supporting them, passing behind the moon, representing truly the mission that they had, poured themselves into. So they, provided some really powerful words live, and they also recorded some as well. Again, all of this will be out as soon as we possibly can. So it's getting closer and closer. This image is kind of neat because it's basically every human being out there, right? Because the crew are actually in this part of the spacecraft, and here's the Earth. If you were in basically Australia or Oceania, that was the part of Earth that they could see at the time. So we made it clear if you go out near one of these places and you look up, you could. And it's getting even closer. Absolutely love this image. It's so emblematic of what we were able to do with this mission. And then this was, thank you. Oh my gosh. Would have been so disappointed if I didn't get that reaction. This is our Earthrise photo, right? And this is Earth set. So because of which sections of each body were illuminated at the time, on Earthrise, which I'll show you, the section of the moon that it was rising behind was not illuminated. So it wasn't the same Apollo 8 image where you had illuminated disk and illuminated disk, but we got that on Earth set. So immediately, this is everybody's phone backgrounds. Literally before I left Houston, there was a giant high-res poster board hung in the SUR. Before I left, real, true story. And so this just, again, absolutely amazing, and it's images like this that even me, I can turn off my lunar science cratering brain for a second and just really look at the magnificence in this image. The Terminator, you guys, I don't know if you've heard of it. This is the Terminator, which is basically kind of the leading edge of the moon from the vantage point of the crew. And the Terminator literally refers to that sort of illumination divide here. You heard a lot of sit reps about the Terminator. It really stuck out to them. It was so stark, it was visceral. You could hear it in their voices. They were oh my, this is absolutely spectacular. And what you heard Victor give, they're all such poets, right? Victor was giving a description of the Terminator, and he described these like islands of light, and if, he said a couple times, it looks like a black hole, whereas like if you went right here, you'd fall through the moon. When he said that, I was like, no. It's still safe. They can still land on it. They're not going to fall through. But it was just beautiful words to describe what they were seeing, and that's how we train them. We were like, we don't need you to be professional geologists. We need you to describe what you see so that we can understand. And so they did that, right? I mean, you heard them do that for 7 hours. At one point, Christina described like a lampshade of like, if you have a lampshade with like kind of pinprick holes and the illumination was coming through, like, yep, nailed it, know exactly what you were seeing. That's exactly what we trained them to do. And they really were struck by the perspective of the Terminator and really understanding the topography, right? This is the equivalent of shining an oblique light, right? So you can see topography and texture pop out. It also is a great analog for South Polar exploration, which is where we want to target the crewed landing missions coming up in 2028. The topography is stark and the lighting is stark, the illumination is stark. And that is a challenge for if you're a human being trying to like navigate around the lunar surface. Lighting is a significant challenge that is facing us for surface exploration, and this picture shows why. So we're getting to the end of the bulk of the flyby here. And you can, again, start to see the edge of the moon. They're saying goodbye to this view of the moon because for this unique opportunity, we had something unique that was afforded to us. Cheesin'. So several launch dates in each window, starting with this window, had a unique celestial opportunity based on the trajectory of the spacecraft for these launch dates, where from the vantage point of Orion, the sun would disappear behind the moon, resulting in a solar eclipse. Did anybody see any of the full total solar eclipses? Amazing, right? So you know kind of what that was like. And what's unique here on Earth is that we are like perfectly positioned in the solar system where the moon, when the sun, in a full total solar eclipse viewed from Earth, the sun and the size of the disk of the sun and the size of the disk of the moon are just perfect enough where the moon blocks the sun except for like that outer corona. So it's that ring of fire, those like totally spectacular images that you see. This was not that. It was a full total solar eclipse where the sun was passing behind the moon. I recently was in a conversation with someone that was like, that doesn't count. And I'm like, definitionally. So from that vantage point, they had this unique opportunity to see this amazing celestial phenomenon in a completely unique way, and there was science there. So when we were approaching these launch dates, we're like, oh my gosh, like we have a couple dates in each of these next few windows where we will get this. And so we threw ourselves into solar science and really built out a series of objectives for them to view the solar corona from this unique vantage point where you don't have the Earth's atmosphere in the way, right? Like you are out in space away from any atmosphere, and you have this opportunity as the moon is setting to view the solar corona from a vantage point that we cannot get anywhere else. We also then have a really, really dark sky with none of that pesky sun or Earth in the way. And so we developed a specific targeting plan for this eclipse time frame. So what it looked like is they had that like roughly 5-hour flyby that I just showed the images from. Then they rolled away from the moon for an hour to get like power and thermal positive and all the things we like in spacecraft. And then when the eclipse happened, we rolled the vehicle back so they could see the sun setting and observe the moon during that time and then see the sun rise out the other end. Absolutely spectacular. And you heard them start to talk about it, and I think it was Victor who was like, this is sci-fi. And we didn't really, like, we were like, yeah, that's cool. And then we got these images down, and we were like, oh, like, yeah, this is pretty wild. I think Reed, I can't remember if he said this in the mission or just in the appearances after the mission, but he was like, humans haven't evolved enough to like comprehend what's in this image. Like he was like, that's how we felt. Like it was like, the human brain is like not equipped to like handle the magnitude of what they were seeing. And what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing planets, Mars, Saturn, Venus, Mercury, oops, no, right here. We're also seeing a bunch of light. And so this image came down, and immediately, like, absolutely classic science, they were like, corona, zodiacal light. No, corona, zodiacal light. And there was like this huge debate about it, which is awesome. Like, that's exactly what we want, right? And as is often the case with science, the answer is both. And so what you see is that zodiacal light, that like interplanetary dust that is floating all around the solar system. And because of this unique lighting, you don't have the full glare of the sun, so you've like turned the dimmer down, and all that nuanced detail starts to pop out. You also see corona. And there were, oh, I love this picture. This was taken from one of the GoPros on the vehicle. And it's just, I don't know, I just like totally was wowed by this, because for some reason, just the view of like what they were seeing, right? Like, this is the spacecraft, and this was the view they had. Like, I just like was like, okay, I get it. Like, I get now why you heard the emotion that you heard in their voice, just when I saw a picture of that. A very funny comment that somebody made to me within the mission, who works on some of these cameras, was like, these cameras have no business taking photos like this. This is incredible, in the best possible way. But thank you. This is great. You guys are the hype people I need. That's corona. Look at that. And more than that, Jeremy, in particular, gave some great descriptions live that you probably heard about this plume that he saw, this transient plume that he didn't see at sunrise. And even in the few minutes, because they only have like 6 minutes, right? Because it's like, as soon as like the actual orb of the sun passes behind the moon, the corona only has a few minutes before that too disappears. So we had like 5-6 minutes. And in that time, they captured descriptions, they made annotations, he sketched this plume. You'll, again, see that when we're able to process all this stuff. And you can see the topography of the moon. Incredible. So much science contained in this data set, and by that I mean these images, but also the descriptions that they were giving going along with these images, as well as the annotations and sketches. I can't wait for you guys to see the sketches. So good. This is amazing. They had this really unique ability, no light, obscuring their field of view, to take some really spectacular, astro photographs, pictures of the night sky. Our team immediately went off and tried to annotate this of all the things we're seeing, like this, what we believe is a Magellanic, oh my God, somebody help me. That's the one, thank you. Off in the corner here. So some really spectacular science across science divisions contained in what we were able to do during this flyby. We were so happy. Oh my gosh. Who has heard of Moonjoy? Yeah, that is what it is. The team was just so happy and full of pride and full of joy. This is the science evaluation room during the flyby. Again, there were like people vibrating with excitement. It was just an incredible wealth of science information that they were able to pull out, and the science team, the joy you see on their faces reflects that, right? That's the joy of seeing people who do amazing things, but it's also the joy of we got what we strove for, which is really, really valuable science. Then overnight, the s'more, who had been told to be sleeping during the flyby so that they could get up and work. No. As the team lead, I was like, la 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 la. They worked all night, so they started getting the images down, and we had that crew conference the next morning, and we really wanted to make the most out of that additional science data collection opportunity, and so they wanted to get as much data as they could and turn around questions for me to ask them the next morning. And so this team, this is where the magic happens. They absolutely just put their, foot down on the gas and created, like this list of questions based around the data that we were able to downlink right away, so that we could really make the most out of that crew conference. They also helped provide support to the public affairs office to help write the captions, because these images, many of them came out like overnight. I was sleeping because I had to get up and do the crew conference the next morning, so they were the first people on the team to see these images. And I've seen some like photos and videos that they thankfully thought to take of each other seeing the images for the first time. Oh my gosh, like when I am feeling sad, I need to make like a happy folder that's just like David Hollabaugh-Baker, our archiving lead, like literally crying, like seeing some of these images for the first time. It's like Marie Henderson, our imaging lead and deputy science lead, working with our PAO, Kayla, who was putting out the captions, and they've been here at this point for like forever. I mean, it's like 15 hours in, and they're still just like emotional seeing the images while also putting out the captions that you ultimately saw. I didn't see any of that. I was asleep. I woke up and saw the images on NASA social media, just like all of you guys. But I'm so grateful that our team got the opportunity to have that experience with the data because of how hard the team like poured themselves into enabling those images we just saw. And then there was me. I was here. The next morning, Christina took this picture as they were kind of waving goodbye. This was the next morning after the flyby, and then we executed that post-flyby crew conference where we actually got to dive into the meat of what they were experiencing. Probably my favorite moment there was they observed impact flashes during the flyby. If you saw potentially anything about me during the mission, it was probably me looking like a total doofus. Reacting to the impact flashes, I did not think we were going to see any. That was pure shock you saw on my face. And that was the first line of questions out of the gate in the crew conference, because they saw several. Like, they saw multiple, 4 or 5 impact flashes. And in the back of our minds, we're like, well, galactic cosmic rays are like a known thing that appear behind astronauts' eyelids that could be mistaken for impact flashes. And they knew that. We trained them on that. And so we wanted to make sure that they were not cosmic rays. And so you hear me going, hi, like, have you seen any, like, I'm trying to like be delicate. I don't want to be like, did you see them? I was like, have you seen any cosmic rays during the mission? And you heard them be like, yep, it wasn't that. And I was like, okay, but like, just wanna, and you just heard him in his like, I am an operator voice be like, no, like, I understand what you're asking, and I need you to listen to me. No, it was very funny. And then ultimately, they confirmed that when I asked them to make a separate annotation for where they all saw them, and they had multiple data points of exactly the same flash in exactly the same spot. So I heard it confirmed in tone as well as actual annotation data. But it was that was a really powerful opportunity to have like a pretty advanced scientific discussion, while our field scientists were still in the field. And then, oh my God, thank goodness. We had several days there where they were flying back and doing more spacecraft checkouts, right? They still had a number of test objectives to like really characterize the performance of the spacecraft. And then came, a challenging day. Coming back from the moon and re-entering the Earth's atmosphere is a challenge, an engineering challenge. Was I nervous? Yes, but I wasn't, like, the team was so prepared. Like, I saw it over and over again, over years and years. Like, they simmed it over and over and over again, and they had all those bad days so that this was a good day. It was a very emotional experience, and I did not breathe a full breath until until the door was open, until the hatch was open, and I saw like a face in there. It was just really emblematic, I think, of the entire effort of like, thousands of people poured everything we had into this. And, my husband is here in the audience today. I have 2 small kids. Like, it has been a huge, the cost that it took on all of us who supported the mission cannot be overstated. And to see this happen, like to see the results of all of those years of travel, of weekends away from my kids, of, and everybody, the thousands of people who had the same, to have it go like this, it was because of every single thing we did over years and years, and this is what we got. And to say there was like emotional release is like putting it mildly, right? I mean, you could see it on everybody's face. Like as soon as we got out of the building that night, you could just, everybody you saw, there was just this instant like, this is why we did that. The lead flight director for the mission, we have our weekly flight control leads tags, and we took a week off. And then the next week, he said something equivalent. He was basically like, you do not get lucky for a 10-day mission. Like each and every single thing you did mattered. And it resulted in this. And it was so great. Oh my gosh, look at them. Yay. So I was going to end on a last slide that just said, hooray, we're going to do a bunch more missions. But I think I'll just leave it here with Moonjoy and a crew that really captivated a worldwide audience. I talked for way longer than I meant to. I'm so sorry. But I am totally here until 8:30, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
It's time for Kelsey to sit down.
Yes, hooray.
Not be quiet, though. So,
We can hear you.
you have a question? We have a microphone coming to you. Hold on, it's coming.
Is it working now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. My Notre Dame geology degree qualified me to be a lunar geologist on Apollo 11.
Woo! Brilliant. Where's our dean to hear this?
So
Hope
you
she's
pretty
watching the
well
recording.
answered most of my questions with your excellent presentation. However, when I was working on the 11 project and the other Apollo projects, the USGS wanted to get involved, and it was kind of a competition between the NASA geologists, I guess it was your group, and them. Are they still trying to get their nose under the camel's tent?
Wow, if I could have predicted a question I would never get, it was that one. I love that. First of all, if you could stick around after, I would love to come up and talk to you and hear about your experience. But I will stop fangirling and answer the question, which is USGS is an amazing partner. Actually, we've really developed an incredibly strong working relationship with them, especially the astrogeology group in Flagstaff, which ultimately led out of Apollo. In many things, they make up a big core of our senior astronaut training leadership team. One of whom, in fact, was just selected as an astronaut, so she can't be a trainer anymore, I guess. And they've also really helped us with permits and access to our really critical training grounds in the Flagstaff area, as well as in New Mexico, where we're about to, in 3 weeks, take out the new astronaut class. And they also provide really critical support in data, all things data and derived data products. And so they have really taken a leadership role in several really, really critical areas of Artemis and science operations, in data, in training, in facilities, which we use there when we go out in the field. Our team was just out there last week using USGS facilities. So no competition, and in fact the opposite. They're a really critical link in the chain here.
Well, the reason why I ask is because when Apollo 11 came back with the first moon rocks, it was kind of a government competition between them and your geology group there at NASA, and it ended up having to go to President Nixon to make the decision on who got the first moon rocks. And what he did is he just split them in two. USGS got half of them, NASA got the other half. Now, one thing too that's not well known, which I got involved with a little bit, because I got in the program after my 8 years active duty as a Corps of Engineer officer. I went through Army ROTC here at Notre Dame. And Grumman Aerospace, who built the original Eagle, the lunar module, had constructed a 3-acre loonscape on eastern Long Island, because that's where they're headquartered. And the interesting thing is we didn't know zippity zip about, what the moon was really composed of. So what happened was that a little bit of Indiana ended up as a covering on that loonscape. What Grumman did is they bought some of the slag from the Gary steel mills. And that was used as a covering for the lunar module, or for the practice on eastern Long Island for the lunarscape. So I do have a question for Dr. Neal. Were you here when Archie McAlpin was here?
I was not.
Oh, okay.
And I've been here 36 years, but I was not. He had retired, I believe, 5 years before I got here.
Okay.
But I would like to talk to you afterwards as well.
Yeah. Good. And this is my last comment. When I interviewed for my job, of course, they had a copy of my Notre Dame transcript. And the guy who was interviewing me said, "Oh, here, I see you took a course called Photogeology and Map Interpretation," and which Archie taught me.
Yep.
And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm going to offer you the job based on this course right now.
Yep.
But I already taken the other 10 required geology courses for my degree. I don't know how many courses they make mandatory nowadays. But yeah, he offered me the job looking at my Notre Dame transcript."
I wish we still taught that, but all right. Well,
You should have been down here giving this talk.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Let's go there, and then we'll go there. I think. You're next, young lady. It's on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Congratulations and thank you. Welcome home.
Thanks.
I'm a retired Air Force officer and a retired Notre Dame faculty member. Arrived here the same time Professor Neal did. We have a common interest in the moon. I had a part to play on the ground in Apollo 16, Mattingly, Duke, and Young. And my question's an engineering question. I'm wondering if you can address the solid rocket booster. I was at Coast Guard headquarters when the Challenger experienced explosive disassembly, and we lost the mission, orbiter, and crew. What's changed? It was rear, as they said, the investigation said, an aft rivet joint in the right booster that allowed the breach. And I'm wondering, as General Yeager put it, you don't have a backup system, you have a 2-ring primary. So what's new? How did they redesign that?
Yeah, definitely can't answer how they redesigned it, but I can tell you the impact that had on, the NASA family and community. Every year we are required to read and watch material on that investigation, both about the technical failures that led to that incident, while also like the NASA culture and management that ultimately contributed to it as well. We have a Day of Remembrance every year for Challenger and Columbia and Apollo 1, and we are required every year, no matter how long you've been here, to read those engineering reports and read the investigation reports to make sure that technologically we have learned the lessons, and also like managerially and organizationally we have and continue to learn those lessons. So I am certainly not an engineer, and so I will not even remotely attempt to address O-ring lessons learned, but I can tell you it made an impact.
Going down here, then up there. Okay, next question.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Young, congratulations on the Artemis mission.
Thank you.
Just like two sets of questions, I'll try and be brief. One, this may be obvious to you folks, you know, we're the public, where it's not obvious to us, but you said illumination is an issue, and you folks intend in 2028 to land on the darker side of the moon. Why so? Why not land on, you know, the illuminated side of the moon? And also, will any of the Artemis crew be involved in 2028 landing missions? And also, what will be the payload for the landing missions? Do you intend to have a habitat on the moon?
So the first question, illumination. So there are very, very few parts of the moon's surface that are never, ever, ever illuminated. Those are called permanently shadowed regions, right there in the name. Moon, fun fact, the coldest temperatures in the solar system are in permanently shadowed regions on the moon, which is pretty amazing. And so it's definitely a misnomer to say sort of dark side of the moon, dark parts of the moon, because with the exception of those small permanently shadowed regions, every section of the moon sees illumination. What's challenging about the South Pole is how fast illumination changes because of the orbital inclination of the moon and the angle, the rate of travel and the celestial mechanics of the Earth-Moon system around the sun. Illumination changes very rapidly over the course of hours, which is, of course, the length of a spacewalk on the surface. And so because we're at the pole and illumination, the shadows are so long and rapidly changing, it is just an engineering and navigation challenge to adapt for the fact that, like, when you look at the same thing an hour later as a person in a spacesuit, it looks totally different than the last time you looked at it. And the science team, high maintenance as they are asking you to find like specific things on the lunar surface you got to navigate to. And so we have spent a lot of time over the last several years like developing hardware that can help mitigate that problem, as well as training, to create crew members that know how to navigate in those environments. Why go to the South Pole? One driver, there are a lot, is science, and volatiles at the South Pole of the moon are really interesting scientifically, but also could potentially be used as an exploration resource. So there are reasons to specifically target the South Pole, and our team has been working on those challenges for many, many years now, ultimately leading toward the next part of your question, which is a long-term sustained presence on the lunar surface, which is NASA's goal. You heard Administrator Isaacman during the Ignition Day event right before Artemis II announce moon base plans, which are what it sounds like, to develop a habitat on the lunar surface. I can speak to it from a scientific perspective, and the longer we have astronauts, on the surface of the moon, the more science we're going to be able to do, especially when you include mobility. When we're enabling them to travel farther and farther away from a moon base, they're going to access geographically, geologically, geochemically diverse terrains, which are ultimately going to help scientists like Clive get those samples back in the lab and interrogate, the next sort of generation of lunar science. And yeah, astronauts will definitely be involved. I mean, as you have probably gleaned, this is a massive team sport. And so Artemis II crew are actively involved in debriefs that are ongoing all week for the next several months on making sure that we're capturing their feedback and insight. And they'll also be supporting the crew that ultimately lands on the surface.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
We're going to move on to a question down here. Sorry, we got plenty of questions coming.
What was your favorite part of the job?
What's my favorite part of the job? It's truly the people, honestly. I mean, I get to go to work every single day with people who are way smarter than me, are way more talented than me, are amazing humans who inspire me every single day and are super passionate about what they do. Like, is there anything better than that, of just, you know, getting to work with such an amazing and diverse group of people that are really have devoted their lives to doing hard things and doing them well? That's truly my favorite part of the job. And not to put anyone on the spot, but one of those awesome people is up at the top of the room there. So anybody who's interested in looking at our amazing user interfaces of these really critical products, give a wave, Dave. Yay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I have 2 questions. The first one is, what type of survival training are the astronauts given, both for like an Earth-based crash landing or a moon-based crash landing?
They are given in astronaut candidacy, which is when an astronaut's first selected. They have 2 years of training. They do land survival and water survival, which is what it sounds like. If you are stranded somewhere on land, here are the skills you need to, survive, and ditto for if there is a incident in the water. They also get like mission-specific training for the vehicle that they fly on. So in the case of Orion, just as one example, it's a water landing. So they go through exercises both in the pool at the Johnson Space Center and actually out in the Pacific to like exercise that process, to sim the process, to make sure that if something goes wrong, the whole team has had a chance to practice it, just like we practice every other phase of the mission. We have astronauts flying on Soyuz vehicles. Those land on land. So there's different, skills and hardware they need to get practice with to manage risk.
Okay, my second question is, which plan is coming first? A lunar, I'm going to say on-land habitat, or the Lunar Gateway project, like the orbiter?
What we heard from the administrator on Ignition Day is moon base.
Yes.
Thank you.
He got it right. So, any more questions? Got one down the front here.
We have many down the front. I
See any more? Any more? Oh. Oh, yeah, we better let Eleanor do it.
Me first?
No, go down here. Sorry, you're going to have to wait. I didn't see you. It's on. Waiting on you.
Sorry.
Hurry up, come on.
Jeez Louise.
So, I heard that Gateway was possibly canceled. Do you have anything on that?
What we heard at Ignition Day, and I will be honest, I tuned in for Ignition Day, and then I was a little busy and distracted doing all of that stuff, was that we are prioritizing Moonbase. How that will actually be implemented programmatically, I think, are still like open trades that people way above me are still working out. But as I crawl out of Artemis II hole, I hope to learn more about those implementation
The actual
plans.
phrasing was, Gateway has been paused. Okay, that was what was said at Ignition. So, Eleanor.
Yeah, of the visualization that had the light areas that have had human eyes laid on them and the darker gray areas that haven't had human eyes on them, could you estimate the percentage that has been seen by human eyes now? And were there any major features that the Artemis II astronauts were unable to see?
Oh, I don't know the percentages, but we should get Ernie on that ASAP. As for features, I talk a lot about the moon we get, right? And so the moon we got was, had a lot of near side illumination, which means it did not have full far side illumination. And so while we missed features like my personal favorite, the South Pelagian Basin, we got the eclipse, right? And so the moon we got was a pretty stellar moon, but we did not, make the whole picture seen, right? Fortunately, we have a lot more missions coming up, so hopefully we get to interrogate those. But directly to answer your question, it's essentially, I don't know, this is like putting it simply, but like when you're looking at the far side of the moon, the left side, we didn't get.
All right. Well, I want to thank this young lady. One more. Have we got one more question here? Got another question? Hold on. Let me just say something. If you want to ask a question, don't do this. Do that. all right? Because this, I'm an old man, I've got glasses on.
I mean, you saw me.
Go ahead.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but earlier you had mentioned that the geography of the moon represented the geography of the planet itself, even though it was covered in trees and water. How exactly does that work?
Yes. So, yeah, this is a tagline I say a lot, and then the crew heard me say it a lot, and now they say it a lot. The moon is a witness plate for our whole solar system, and especially for our own planet. And so by that we mean that basically the moon is like in our backyard. Like it's like right there when you consider the entire solar system. And that means that like in the context of the entire solar system, the moon and the earth are like experiencing the exact same things, right? So like what the earth has experienced, the moon has experienced. We have hypotheses for how and when the moon formed, but they have been together in space, basically holding hands for well over 4 billion years. But the moon does not have plate tectonics. It does not have oceans. It does not have vegetation. And so on Earth, that early record of 2, 3, 4 billion years ago has been erased because the crust has eaten it in plate tectonics. Oceans cover it up. And on the moon, none of those processes exist. And so we can actually access part of the geologic record of our own planet, 2, 3, 4 plus billion years on the moon that has been erased on our own planet.
Okay, so one last question. We'll take the last question at the back because he followed the rules. Yeah. Oh, right at the back there, hand up. He had his hand up.
Can you please comment on the cost benefits of this mission?
The
cost benefits analysis, I suppose it has been done by NASA. Can you perhaps comment on this?
I can't really. I can tell you what the benefits are, and I've touched on a lot of that today, but I'm not kind of the right person to address that question.
All right, well, as that wasn't...
Talk to the administrator about that.
Okay. All right, this is the last one. Because you couldn't get an answer to that question.
What a softie.
Well, you know that.
Can you comment on the collaboration, considering we had a Canadian as one of the four? What kind of political or friendship or knowledge sharing exists, and you see that going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good question. The simple answer is we go further together, right? I mean, NASA can't do it alone, and it's the commercial and international partnerships that have really enabled us to push as far as we have. The human spaceflight as a team sport phrase is completely emblematic, and I think it plays into this question. We have so many partnerships. There's a reason it's called the International Space Station that have gotten us to this point, and Artemis is also a massive international effort. While we had a Canadian on the crew, we also had the European Space Service Module that was powering the spacecraft. We had a number of other international contributions, including some international payloads, secondary payloads on the SLS rocket. So it is truly a group effort internationally, and it's a group effort with our commercial partners as well, like as one example, Lockheed, who developed the Orion spacecraft.
Yeah, the other thing to that, Artemis Accords now has 63 countries signed up to be part of Artemis. And that is phenomenal. And so there's a lot of interest around the world to be part of Artemis. And that should not be lost on everybody here, that we go to the moon and we go beyond for all humankind, just as the Outer Space Treaty says. Sorry, I'm quoting international law now. So I'm proving that geologists can do anything. But that is something that really hits home as to just how much the world is interested in this. 63 countries. It's a lot of countries. So, and with that, thank you, Kelsey, for coming back. Yeah, she's one of our own. Yeah.